This is Anthony Pascal.
And this is Laurie Elster, and this is the All Access Star Trek podcast. Lower Decks is back, so we have 2 episodes of Season 5 to review. And before we do that, we got a lot of news because Comic-Con was last weekend.
And you were there.
I was. New York Comic-Con, baby. They had a big Star Trek panel. They had stuff they hadn't even announced that appeared at the panel, and I did some roundtable interviews also. It was fun.
So they announced the panel for Section 31 and Lower Decks, which made sense. But then they had a surprise Starfleet Academy section and a surprise Strange New Worlds. And it's like, I don't know, it just seemed gimmicky. Like, of course, they're going to talk about everything, but they made it like a surprise.
Well, because they always promise surprises. So yeah. I guess they wanted to have real. I mean, the big surprise for me was when Carol Kane and Ethan Peck walked out on stage. Because I was not expecting to see Carol Kane at Comic-Con.
Well, you saw her in Vegas, though, didn't you?
Yes. But this was like, I don't know. It just, I had no idea that she was going to be there. So it was like a big, exciting moment for sure. And there was something about her dynamic with Ethan Peck that was really sweet. Like they seemed to have a nice thing going.
Let's start with Section 31, which is one of the official things they were going to have in the panel.
We finally have a premiere date. That's what we've been waiting for.
Which is January 24th, 2025. They also released some character posters and a new poster. I mean, you can tell just from the look of the way they're presenting this movie, it's different than everything else they do for Star Trek. Just the kind of the bold styling and that kind of, they're definitely... But there was no clip. There was no trailer.
I don't know why they didn't just show us a little bit of it.
Yeah. I mean, they brought Michelle. So Michelle Yeoh, that was another surprise, although not really, that she was shooting something in Prague and she showed up via video.
She's so fancy. I love that. Oh, I'm in Prague, you know.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, once she won an Academy Award, her dance card was full.
Yes.
But it is nice that Section 31 was her first thing. There was a few bits that came out of the panel and in your discussions. What do you think is like the biggest, like, oh, I didn't know. I'm surprised about that.
Well, it was actually just finding out who some of these people are. For me, that was the big thing because all we knew was Rachel Garrett and Georgiou.
Right. And we knew Sam Richardson, who wasn't part of any of this, is a cameloid that came out of Comic-Con. I mean, it's confirmed now this is during the Lost era, which we've kind of figured out.
Yep.
The leader of the group is Omari Hardwick. We kind of figured that out. You know, he's kind of older. He's a pretty big actor. He was in that show Power and stuff like that.
He said that he is super older than 100. That was the quote I got from him when we did roundtable interviews, which will go up next week, I think, on the site. But so I said, "Are you a Lorian?" And he said, "No."
Right. So he's probably genetically modified or something like that.
Yes, because apparently his backstory involves the eugenics wars in some way. But he said his character has recruited the team and he wants Georgiou to pay the price for what she's done, but he also has done some things, so maybe he understands her a little more. So
did you get the sense that he's like leading Section 31 or just leading this team? I'm still fuzzy on that detail.
Well, he said he recruited this team.
Right. So he's in charge. Like the guy playing Zeph, Rob Kaczynski, who's like a huge Trek nerd.
And a sweetheart. They were both super nice guys.
Yeah. So he talks about like, he's like the soldier. He's the guy that everyone thought was a Borg, but he's just kind of wearing a mech suit. And he's, he's just a soldier. He says, he points me, where he wants me to go and I do whatever he asks me to do, moral or not.
I said, "What's your character's relationship with Georgiou?" And he said, "It doesn't matter."
Yeah.
So, and apparently the suit is like an exoskeleton and it allows him to do some amazing physical things. And this was kind of interesting because I asked them both if they had been given backstories because those two were paired up together at the interviews. And he said that he went to the writer, Craig Sweeney, and asked what his backstory was, and they created it sort of together. And it's not in the movie, but that he was a paraplegic because of something he did to himself trying to augment himself.
Interesting. And we also confirmed that Rachel Garrett, she's in Starfleet and she's kind of there to keep an eye on these guys, and, it tests her, moral standing, as it were. They leaned into this whole misfit thing. In the panel, they're like, the question for everyone was, how is it that you don't fit, aren't qualified for Starfleet? And she's the only one who says, well, of course I'm qualified, but everyone else is kind of not Starfleet material. That's why they're part of Section 31.
Right.
Well, one thing that, this is probably because I read too many spy novels and watch too much of that kind of stuff, is that Tunde described Section 31. He drew an analogy to the CIA. And I know this is a minor thing, but that bothers me because Starfleet intelligence is the equivalent of CIA. CIA is like a legitimate organization. Sure, they've done some, nasty stuff and a couple of coups in the 50s or whatever.
They're pretty shady.
But no, but they are, they recruit on college campuses. You could, pick up the phone and call the CIA. We know where their building is. They're just a regular government agency that does intelligence. The whole point of Section 31 is it's not that they do secret things. It's the fact that the organization itself is supposed to be a secret, and they do off the book things and illegal things. And, the CIA has to, they have Senate oversight and, all that kind of stuff. This would be whatever this group is, which Rob Kaczynski said, is that they're doing the things that Starfleet can't do. And, so, I'm sure he gets that, but it's a bad analogy.
He was very up to date on, like, he was talking in the interview about the Legacy program and UFOs and how they're like groups doing things that we don't really know about.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what Olatunde was trying to get to. And also, the one question that they got asked by every single person and came up at the panel was about the tone and, like, how do you have Star Trek idealism if you're going to have this focus on Section 31? And they all insisted that the idealism is there, that yes, there's darkness, but there's lots of laughs in there and lightness, but also that the idealism is there and that everybody's moral fiber is Starfleet based.
Yeah, he did say in the end, Section 31 is good, not meaning the movie, but the group itself. Like they do the good, they do the right thing.
I'm sure he thinks the movie's good too.
Yeah. My bet is, I don't know, when we see, if you think about like a show like 24 or something like that, I doubt we're going to see any of these people torture anyone, go full Jack Bauer on them or anything like that.
Yeah. Jack did some bad things and couldn't, had trouble living with himself afterwards.
Yeah, Jonathan Archer did some bad things. It was the post 9/11 era was a different era in popular entertainment. I think their main thing is the fact that these people aren't Starfleet material, that they, that they're the Suicide Squad of Starfleet, essentially.
Right.
I'm looking forward to it. Everyone said they would do more if there was a possibility, including Michelle, which is kind of the important bit.
Right.
And they're not ignoring the fact that she's a tyrant and did horrible things. Obviously the leader of this group, says that's, she has a price to pay, so That's interesting.
And we will see, the trailer that came out a while ago showed young Georgiou. And so I asked Olatunde if we were going to see, if that's a big part of it. And he said, well, you will see a lot of her, and that is about sort of understanding a little more about who she is.
Yeah, it's like, well, she's just misunderstood, which is, so
well,
she did.
That's not what he was saying.
I know, but I that's what I suspect. It's like, yes, someone was mean to her when she was a little girl, so later in life, when she does a little, genocide, it's fine.
I actually didn't get that vibe. It was, so it wasn't that flippant. I think it's probably just that, someone can be trained to be a certain person their whole life.
She grew up in a very harsh world where everything she did, what she did was not out of character for that world. That's for sure.
Right. And she was trained to be a certain thing and forced to be a certain thing. I think that's the vibe I got.
Yeah. I think the biggest surprise was like the Starfleet Academy. So Picardo came out on stage because they're shooting now, and they did a video connection, and Alex was in Toronto. I don't know if he just flew there for this or maybe he's directing an episode. Did they say that? I don't know, but why would Alex be there?
Well, he is really involved in it.
That's true.
So that made sense to me. And I guess if he was going to fly, if his choice was fly to New York to do Comic-Con or fly to Toronto and do Comic-Con and work, that would make sense too. Yeah.
he made a big announcement, which was a surprise. I think this is maybe the biggest surprise from Comic-Con, which is that Starfleet Academy has a second season ordered from Paramount Plus already.
Which in this climate of TV is bonkers.
Yeah, no, he framed it as they like what they're seeing. They've been shooting since August, so there's probably dailies and, maybe some early cuts. I bet it always had a soft green light because
of the set.
Because of just the cost. Like it only makes sense. The bean counters are like, this only makes sense if we spread it out over a couple years anyway.
Yeah.
But it probably means that they're going to already get to work because of the long lead time. They may be working on season 2 before season 1 ever happens.
Right.
Certainly writing, if not into production. I wouldn't be surprised if they go for close to back-to-back productions, which would be another money saver if they can get it written that fast.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't a great strategy with Picard in the end.
No, but a lot of that was because they completely rewrote season 2.
It was like a different show.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that is different. I mean, it'll be interesting. Like, I think you're right that they might decide to do that. I'm not sure if it's the greatest choice, but look, everyone's trying to save money right now, and Paramount especially. Yeah. So it does kind of make sense financially.
Yeah. Now, the other big news was Tatiana Maslany, who, I first got to know her in Orphan Black, which I think was a great show. She was a star of that show, played multiple characters. She has a recurring role. She's also She-Hulk. She's
great in She-Hulk. It's a very silly show, but she's terrific in it. And she also she pops up in Parks and Rec.
Yeah, she's been here and that. Yeah. She's an Emmy winner, or at least an Emmy nominee. Yeah, she's solid, and they already had lots of solid actors on the show, so it was like, oh, and we got another one. And this is season 1 too, so this isn't had nothing to do with the season 2 announcement. She's a recurring role in season 1.
Yeah,
we don't know what is she. Does she work for Paul Giamatti? Is she his second in command or whatever he is? Some bad guy, or is she just another teacher? The fact that they didn't tell us, I feel like, is meaningful because we know what everyone else is, sort of.
Yeah, I agree.
Still no release date. 2026 is just an estimate. I wouldn't be surprised if they squeeze it in by the end of 2025. I mean, there's not much else going on.
Yeah, they might.
Speaking of 2025 stuff, Strange New Worlds, surprise.
Good segue.
Yeah, there we go. So they, as we mentioned, so the 2 showrunners and Carol Kane and not Carol King.
Yes, she joked. She said that they thought they were calling Carol King.
Yeah, which is like, why would Star Trek want Carol King? But no, it was funny.
Yeah.
And they brought a new clip, and what's interesting about this clip is it's clearly the first seconds or the first, minute and a half of season 3, because it's right after the cliffhanger. It's basically and now the conclusion, because we ended with the weird ending of season 2 where Pike is like, I don't know what to do, man, and I never liked that. And here he's decisive, and he is
like, not decisive. He is asking everybody else what to do.
Yeah, but he eventually makes a decision, is my point. I thought he was completely losing it at the end of season 2. And so he solicits opinions, he makes a decision, and, so it looks like he's going to defy orders, or no, he is going to leave and leave some people behind. But he's going to eventually come back.
When I watched the clip, and he was like, what was their order exactly? And Uhura tells him it was to leave and then, get together with everybody else. And then he says, well, did they say right away, immediately? And she says, no. And then I went back and I watched the end of season 2 again, and they did say immediately.
Yeah, they kind of rejigger the end of season 2, but whatever.
Yeah, so,
it's been so long. Who's going to remember unless you go back and watch it?
I mean, I like a captain that asks everybody's opinions and that uses his people, but I just would really like him to come up with something. Like, I just really would have liked if he'd had an idea.
Yeah, he's had that before. But yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
I think they need to make him a stronger captain. Because Anson could totally do it. He's terrific. But they just sometimes don't make him this great leader that I would like to see him as.
The other big news, big-ish, I was excited about this, is they announced another guest star for season 3, which has already been shot, which is Rhys Darby. He's a New Zealand actor, very funny. He was in Our Flag Means Death, which is, kind of the most recent show he starred in. But he's been in all sorts of stuff, and I'm just I'm a big fan.
They said he's going to play a character that will be familiar yet completely new to folks that know Star Trek. So people have been guessing. The biggest guess I've seen out there is Sybok.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. People are saying Finnegan, which, I guess if he could do an Irish accent, why not? It's probably a familiar character, but they want to do a different spin on it. They said they had a lot of fun with him on set, so it sounds like a comedy role, probably. So we'll see.
Yeah, I've seen people guessing Trelane as well.
He could do that. He's very broad.
Yeah, because he's the kind of guy that could pull that off.
For sure. At the panel, there wasn't much said. So they did this thing of describe season 3 in 3 words. Some of them played along. Henry said his 3 words were dancing, murder, and surprise. So murder, we know what that is the murder mystery. Dancing, I guess there's a dancing episode or an episode with dancing.
Sure.
Carol just said too much fun. Ethan took it seriously and he said history. So some legacy stuff, right? Betrayal.
Boom, boom, boom.
Because the way he talked, I'm wondering if this is all Spock related stuff and growth. Because it kind of sounded like he was talking about Spock stuff.
Right.
So betrayal, maybe there's a thing with him in Chapel, and maybe this has to do with the fact that Corby's part of this season. So, I thought that's kind of what I took away from it, but who knows?
Right. Although they did break up anyway, but yeah.
Yeah.
And Carol Kane said we'll get to see Pelia's quarters and spend some time with her.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's all sorts of kooky old stuff in her quarters, including an old Atari. So, yeah, she's having fun on the show.
I know. I can't get over some of the actors that we have in Star Trek now. Let's just say actors that the rest of my family has heard of.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So nothing about season 4. We don't have any news on when season 3 is going to arrive except 2025. They didn't even say early or late. It's just 2025.
And they didn't have interviews with any of those people, even though they were there.
The final thing was the Lower Decks part of the panel, and they showed an episode. I mean, what was it like? So you watched episode 501, but not 502, right?
Yeah, they showed 501 in its entirety. And I have to say, there is nothing like watching Lower Decks in a huge crowd of people. I mean, I'd already seen it a whole bunch of times because we had screeners and I was going to interview them and we were planning our reviews. So I was mainly just trying to clock crowd reaction, which was really fun. And the response was huge.
Do you remember what got the biggest laugh, perhaps?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't remember. I wasn't weighing which got a bigger laugh. I was just enjoying the audience having a great time.
You talked to Mike at the junket. What was your biggest takeaway from that, you think? I
did get the vibe, I keep saying vibe today, that he does think there is a way in the future to do more. He didn't sound super gloomy about it.
I talked to the actors, so I did a Comic-Con remote interview with all of the actors, and all of them talked about this being a temporary pause. Not that there's anything specific, but they all want to do more. Jack said he'll do this till he's dead. Yeah, they seem to believe that there's going to be more.
In some form, yeah.
Some jumping forward in time, jumping back. What was interesting is Mike talking in your interview about jumping back in time, doing prequel stuff, and maybe they'll do comic books or books, or maybe it won't even be. So yeah, this isn't the end of the road for Lower Decks for sure, but it is, or at least not for these characters.
Yeah, and he still just has so many stories he wants to tell.
Yeah, he's brimming.
He talked a lot about how it's fun for them to have the confidence that they have as they're doing as they were doing season 5, and that he loves the Star Trek audience because you don't have to explain things. Like, you don't have to explain what a multiverse is, and you don't have to explain what nanites are. You just get to throw that stuff in, and you trust your audience to know what it is.
And they trust themselves. He did talk, and we'll get into this, when we're doing the review, but, he speaks very confidently. They feel like they know what they're doing, which is why it feels, I think, difficult for them to let go, because they're getting, they know they're good at this now.
Yeah. Yeah, they've nailed it.
They're certainly not tired of it.
He talked about, we saw in the trailer that Garrett Wang is in it, and he said that he loved working with him, that he's compared him to Frakes, actually. He said, like, he comes in super high energy, so much enthusiasm, and he comes in and he can be the Harry Kim they need him to be, and then when he needs to bring in comedy, that's his thing. He loves comedy. I mean, I know Garrett has done stand-up. Yeah. I've never seen the stand-up. But that he does love that stuff.
He has a good sense of humor, and so
he does. He's funny and playful.
I thought it was interesting how, because talking about how the different shows talk to each other, and we do know that Garrett Wang's character has been a debate. Like, was he going to be on Picard? Was he going to be on Prodigy? And I guess it's curious how he landed on this show, but. Lower Decks wanted to use the Doctor, but Prodigy was using the Doctor. And so there was going to be a thing where Picardo's Doctor was mentoring Tendi.
Which would have been really fun. I mean, It turned out what they're doing is great, but that would have been really, really fun.
Everybody wants a piece of Picardo.
Yep, they do. He's the happy man, I think.
So, when he hears that, he's like, well, why didn't you? I would have done it. I could do them all.
I feel like he'd do everything. Yeah. I mean, it was interesting because he said, like, we do meet with the other showrunners and we all talk. He said, but sometimes things change, like Riker showing up in the Picard season 1 finale after reshoots. So when they had Riker, they didn't know that he was also going to be in Picard.
Yeah. Yet another season 1 of Picard was a complete, fustercluck, as it were. and they were changing it. They're still doing rewrites on that. Now, he talked about the finale. He said people are going to cry.
Yeah.
And in my actor chat, Tawny said that the finale went through a lot of rewrites. And we've heard that it's like supersized or whatever. So everything we're hearing about the finale is they really put a lot of effort into this, because they knew what it was.
Yeah.
Because that was it. Like Mike said, they knew early on in the writing process that this was going to be their last season, well before it was officially announced, and that they made changes to the season all along to accommodate for that. Most apparently in the finale itself. But I feel like, I mean, I could be reading stuff but even just these first 2 episodes, like especially episode 2, it's like it feels like they are in a hurry to get stuff done with these characters to move,
to get them where they need to be. Well, on that note, maybe we should talk about those 2 episodes.
Absolutely. So it's time to talk about the season premiere of Lower Decks, season 5, which is 2 episodes. I mean, there's some continuation, but we're going to do them as 2 separate episodes because there's kind of 2 different discussions to have, right?
Well, they are 2 different episodes, so that's why. They're not like a 2-parter.
No. Although you could argue the Tendi storyline is kind of a 2-parter. But yeah, we'll do Dos Cerritos first, and then we'll do Shades of Green second.
All right. It's been a while since we reviewed an episode. I might forget how.
Well, we did. I mean, we did over like 2 weeks. We reviewed every episode of Prodigy. That was like all a blur, remember, over the summer?
Yeah. And now I have nothing left. No. No, let's dive in. Because we got to squeeze a lot of stuff into the podcast this week. So my overall take, this was just, they are very good at season premieres.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's very, as always with Lower Decks, was it funny? Yes. And that's kind of all that matters. But on top of that, I thought this was a great season premiere because it really set up the season.
I also thought it was, and I don't use this word a lot, it was very confident. Like they definitely know what works. And they bring it all to the forefront in this episode. And they set up a season really nicely.
Yeah, and when you talked to, or was it you? Yeah, you talked to Mike about this. You know, he's like, we know what we're doing now. You know, we're good at this, and that's not arrogance. That's like, we've been at this, and we've got the formula down of how to balance things, and it's all working. But I also, really, I mean, it's a little heavy-handed, the kind of, using the alternate versions of, meeting an alternate crew so that each character can kind of have this kind of a mix of, what life could be, or is it a cautionary tale, or, that kind of thing.
But what's funny is that, that is traditionally why they use the mirror universe. And the mirror universe shows these extremes, but this just shows like minor variations.
Yeah. According to Tallinn, a 0.3 something, whatever it was.
It's like, as they said, like they made slightly dissimilar choices.
It was a bit of a clue, but the uniforms were just slightly darker. It helped keep track of everyone. Some of them were...
Well, they had different hair. Some people had different hair or different...
Right. Billups was a king, so he had the cape and, the crown.
Right. Ransom had different hair. Shax had different hair.
Rutherford was quite different, obviously.
Otherford. Okay, Otherford is genius.
Yes. Mariner was a captain. Boimler had a beard. So, there were certainly... the Tallinns, on purpose, were identical, except for their catchphrase.
Right.
And I love how the Dr. Ta'anas just couldn't stand each other from the start.
Yeah. I know there's lots of little fun backgroundy things going on with the doubles when they all come out and they start pairing up.
Yeah, like Billups doesn't like the other Billups and argues with him, but he's very not like, he's like, Your Highness, because he's...
Right.
That's how he was brought up. So he's properly deferential to even though he could be a king if he wanted to be, but he chose not to be. But this other Billups.
And the Ransoms are still impressed with each other's handsomeness.
They don't like each other, but they love each other at the same time.
Because they love themselves.
Of course.
Yes. But I think can stretch so far beyond this episode too, because it does, as minor as some of the changes were, it still does ask really good questions about what happens with these differences. And there are things for the characters to think about and dwell on.
Well, I think some of the things are pretty on the nose for our lower deckers. So, the episode starts off with each of them, we're not counting Tendi, we'll get to her in a second, kind of saying to the audience and to each other what their season issue is. Like Boimler is worried that he peaked in the season 4 finale when he got to be captain. Otherford is, or regular Rutherford Prime, if we accept that this is the Prime universe.
Not the weirdishly freakish, whatever.
Is, basically he can't handle not being around Tendi. And Mariner is like, how do I be a leader? I don't want to be a leader. And then each of them is presented with the kind of the perfect opportunity. You have a Rutherford who has forgotten Tendi. You have a Boimler who's supremely confident. And you have a Mariner who's a leader. And
who has in certain ways become very much like the way her mother was at the very beginning of the show, which they, hang a lantern on with their line about the sarcastic Vulcan salute.
For sure. And it was smart not to have, you couldn't have the mom character be around because you needed her to be a captain. But then they turned that into something where she's, where Carol's just obsessed, like, where am I? And like, no one will ever know her. And you think like, I knew she wasn't dead, but the kind of implication was she was. And then of course she's at Starbase 80, which is
right.
Everyone had something, but it was really Mariner and Boimler kind of, but it's obviously, you and I, we've, because of the New York Comic Con and the junkets, we have seen ahead, but it's not spoiling too much to say, because as Mike said in your interview, this will have implications throughout the season. They were doing all of this on purpose.
And I thought that when I'd only seen this episode.
Oh, yeah, immediately. And as soon as Boimler stole the pad, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's going to be a thing.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, it was a great app, but it was just full of like, I always say it's funny because I want to laugh at these things. And, there's just so many great lines. What the Kazinti fuck is going on in here, which is a bit of a deep cut if you don't know what a Kazinti is. And we haven't even talked about the Tendi storyline, which actually starts us off because we have to pick up from the cliffhanger from last season when she left the ship, and we start with her. I mean, you knew it was her right away, right? You knew the kind of human woman was Tendi.
Yes. And that clip was also released, a while ago too. So we've had time to look at it anyway.
Yeah.
The most toys. The prescription thing, which we've already laughed about.
Yeah.
But I like they still set up like, Tendi has to do one more mission and then she can rejoin Starfleet. And I was sure that was going to happen in this episode. And then it didn't.
Well, it did and it didn't, in that she did everything she needed to do to get back to Starfleet and then made a choice. So, no, but I am glad that unlike previous seasons, they didn't wrap up the cliffhanger right away. And they're letting that Tendi Orion story play out, which, I mean, jumping ahead a little bit, obviously they did wrap it up at the end of the second episode. So,
yes,
because I was wondering after I saw that, I'm like, how long are they going to keep her out there now that they didn't wrap that up? And I thought, they're going to like do a whole, many episodes with her as a pirate.
And then poor sad Rutherford would have just been bereft for a long time.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was probably one of the better reasons to wrap it up, unless he maybe he would have left to join her. Who knows? But no, I think that was fine. But I'm glad because it gave us an opportunity, because there was a lot going on in her storyline in both of the episodes. But in episode 1, it's hard to say what the A story is in a way. I mean, they're almost. Yeah, I guess. I mean, the Tendi story is the B story, but it starts with the Tendi story. So I feel like it's not a minor B story, is the point. It's like a fairly well balanced B story. She's
one of the main characters of the show. So that's why. But since the other story had all the rest of the characters, then that gets to be the A.
Yeah, of course.
One thing I appreciated that they did was for the end when Becky kidnaps Mariner and switches places, that they resolved it very quickly. They didn't draw it out. It was so well timed.
Well, this gets to the issue of this show knows that we are fans of the show, and the whole that there's a lot of things where they realize that not only the audience but this crew know how the universe works.
Right.
And so, it's a subspace rift. They don't need to explain what that is. It's an alternate crew. They don't need to explain what that is. We they've all read the blogs. They know how these things work.
As Mike McMahon said at Comic-Con, they've all watched Parallels. Like we've watched Parallels. They've read the reports.
Yeah. So someone trying to pretend that they are the alt version. It's like, I'm glad, and I am glad that that Carol figured it out very quickly.
Yes.
Didn't need Mariner to explain like the weird mole situation to prove. Yeah, I guess the question is though, when you think long term, and we haven't seen the whole season, looking at Mariner and her big story, is this kind of saying that leadership isn't for her, or she has to find a different way to be a leader?
Yeah, that she has to find a way to be a different leader.
Yeah.
I mean, she doesn't want to be a captain, she said. And for now, I believe her. But she does have to learn to be an authority. She did get promoted, and she is open to learning how to deal with that. She is more open than she's been in every season before.
And she's certainly seen how not to do it on a ship that's mostly Briggs.
That's mostly Briggs. And she doesn't carry a riding crop.
No. That was a great moment when she, grabs the riding crop before. Who was she trying to hit? What's the Temerian officer's name? Lieutenant Kayshawn.
Yeah. No, and I liked when Ransom snapped it in half.
Yeah. I mean, of course, how was this ever allowed? But this is an alternate Starfleet, so who knows what they're like, right. Over there.
The rules are different.
Yeah, indeed. Even though it's a 0.3% variance.
Right.
It's enough for that.
And we did learn that Naomi Wildman is 10 years old.
Right, which there was a point to that, because if that shows that it's been a year since maybe not since the finale, but this is another year forward. So it is 2382 now, because Naomi Wildman was born in 2372.
I know you love your years.
I know, but it's important because we need to know where we are relative to the other shows.
Yeah, no, that's why I brought it up. It's 100% why I brought it up.
Yeah. Now, why would she be in the 30 Under 30 of Fleet magazine? That's, certainly to the annoyance of Boimler.
But I was excited for her. I wish we could see her. I just was hoping that one of these shows would bring her back. Anyway, let's talk about Tendi's story a little bit, because I loved, of course, fantastic callback to the animated series with the Orions. That was so smart and actually resolves a canon issue that's been around for decades.
It's strangely respecting what is essentially a production error.
Yes.
Because the Orions were blue on the animated series, and they wore these ridiculous outfits, and they had this kooky looking ship, and they just said, "Oh, that's all."
And everybody called them Orions.
Yeah, and now that's all canon, but there's a reason for that.
Yes.
So no, it's brilliant, because they had a lot of fun with it. Although, I mean, they kind of treated those guys a lot. They were essentially Orion Pack-Leads. I mean, they weren't that stupid, but they kind of acted a bit like Pack-Leads, I thought. Yeah,
well, they were kind of dumb.
And that part provided a lot of the good action for the episode, because you need a good level of action. And the whole notion that Tendi is having difficulty remaining Starfleet while she's stuck with a bunch of Orions, just to keep them killing people. And then I loved how all of her crew admitted that they don't like stabbing people and cleaning up all the blood either.
Yeah, they just want to bake and dance and teach ethics maybe once or twice a week.
Right. In the evenings, I believe.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's opening up, Orion culture to a certain degree, because one, we're finding out that not everybody wants to just pillage. And two, we get the history of this old ship that they find, that it's a medical frigate, which is also surprising. So they're trying to show some nuance to the Orions, which I like.
Yeah, I think Mike has talked about how one of the things he wanted to do is flesh out the Orions. And while on one hand, this is a comedy show, they are actually adding to the canon in an interesting way. In these two episodes, much better than Enterprise did. I think.
Better than anyone ever did.
Yeah, for sure.
Any of the shows that have had them. I have a few other favorite lines that I just felt. My list was long, but I'll just do a couple that I really liked, which is, I liked Rutherford saying, "I like the way work makes it hard for my brain to focus on the sad stuff," which I'm sure we've all experienced. And Boimler saying, "Sometimes my nostrils look aggressively flared." And he also said, "When I wink at people, they think I'm having a seizure."
Did you feel it? To me, it felt like Jack Quaid was, so for alternate Boimler, he was just kind of being Jack Quaid. There is a difference between Jack and Boimler. Boimler's more hyper, and there was a slight difference in the voices, I thought. Well,
I thought the same for Mariner, too. And it made sense. Like Jack Quaid, it's so interesting because, like on The Boys, he plays this kind of nerdy guy, or at least started out that way. And Boimler is that way. But Jack Quaid is this incredibly talented, smart son of two really famous Hollywood people. I'm sure he's a confident guy.
Yeah. And I think that came through.
Yeah. Like he's in demand in Hollywood right now. He's very talented. He's doing a lot of stuff. He's enjoying himself. So, he got to be more self-assured there. But but his message from his double was like, you need to try to be yourself. And our Boimler is still just trying to look for somebody else to emulate.
Yeah. He's such a hero worshiper that he was hero worshiping himself, which was kind of the point.
Yes.
I thought. So if we want to grab lines we like, I think I've mentioned a few. I did like Ransom yelling out when they were going into the rift. He goes,
yes,
we're dunking into the rift like a big old cookie.
Like a big old cookie.
Yeah, everyone had good stuff to do in this episode. That's the thing. Like, they really spread things around. Everyone had a good line or two.
I like Tillin going, I have fooled you.
Yes, well, I mean, this will, of course, bring up the possibility that she didn't, that this is alt. I mean, how would we know the difference, right? Like, They might have considered it an interesting experiment to switch places.
Sure.
Would it make a difference?
Probably not.
Exactly, which is kind of the point. Any other fun Easter eggs before we move on?
Well, I liked seeing Kalto again. That's always fun.
Yes. There was a couple mentions of a rogue archaeologist, and of course, there are a few. I thought, and I was wondering if that was going to be a thing. Like, who is this rogue archaeologist?
Right, and it might be.
Vash is, the obvious one.
Or the one that was in Lower Decks.
The one that Mariner hooked up with, and so there's possibility. Obviously, the Collector had some fun stuff in his collection, including a Horgon and a Bajoran tablet, Star Trek II phaser. Although I'm sure he didn't call it a Star Trek II phaser.
Probably not.
Unless, he's from the metaverse. So, no, this is...
yeah, they came in strong.
And I think this is better than doing a Mirror Universe story.
Oh, yeah, I don't need another Mirror Universe story. Plus, it gets so complicated when you have to figure out where they are and what's happening politically and all of that. So it makes sense. Yeah, it was better to stay out of it.
So let's move on to the second episode, which is Shades of Green. When fans saw this title, everyone was making jokes about, is this going to be a clip show? Right. I wonder if they even, I assume they thought of that when they did this. Because
I'm sure I don't see how they could have not noticed.
But they didn't hang a lantern on that at some point,
Nope.
Because there was nothing clip show about this one at all. Although I love the premise of this one.
No, it's funny. I put it on and my 20-year-old son was walking by, and as soon as he heard them talking about like a newly post-scarcity society, he sat down and wanted to watch with me.
I mean, we all see Star Trek, and there's been, DS9 kind of, and First Contact talked about like how does a society even work without money? And this, this deals with, obviously the transition isn't going to be easy. Although I guess the implication is that this is, again, for the Cerritos, it's probably something that they do normally, although it's implied that this society just joined the Federation. So I guess, like, is this a requirement? I mean, we could get it because we've heard, like, the Bolians have a bank, like, who has, can you have money and be in the Federation? I don't know. They obviously weren't getting into that level of detail.
No, and that they were trying to establish that this was familiar territory for the crew. Like, Ransom was like, yeah, sometimes this happens. This is how it goes. Right,
like when the crew is kidnapped and it's like, oh, jewel encrusted, aliens did this, because apparently it's happening all over the planet. That so much so that they don't have anyone to help, which means they probably should have brought more than one ship if they knew this kind of stuff was going to happen.
It all worked out.
I guess so.
But it was a great trope to take on. It was a really, really good choice.
Yeah, they weren't saying post-scarcity is stupid, utopia is stupid. They weren't saying that. They were just kind of, let's get into the nitty-gritty of what would it be like if you had to witness the transition.
Right.
People would party.
And you'd turn the stock exchange into an animal hospital. And then it would smell better.
Right. And you'd have the Museum of Friendship.
Yes.
And people would say, why are we standing in line?
We can just go in.
So, no, it was, the aliens were fun. And now in this one, I guess we still consider the post-scarcity the A story, but there was a lot going on. There was even more B story this time, more Tendi.
It was a bigger story, and definitely trying to show how she's reconciling these two worlds, which she successfully does at the end. I did love the cutiny.
Yeah.
That was very funny.
I mean, I do like when the A and the B stories are somewhat connected, but there was no way to do it in the first one. But here they did a little bit, which I appreciated.
Yeah, they tied them together at the very end.
And yes, sorry, you were saying the Cutiny, fantastic.
Cutiny was fantastic. I have to say, I didn't like the sail ship race. I gotta say, like, whenever Star Trek does a race, it's not that interesting to me. Like, oh, let's do a race to see who went. Really? That's what we're gonna do? But I thought the visuals were great. It looked really, really good. But that wasn't the fun part of the story for me.
No, it was a little like it was spot on to the DS9 sail ship a little bit. Did it fit with Orion's? Would they do, I guess they're saying.
No, and Prodigy just had their race episode too. Like, it's not that interesting.
Yeah.
But the important part in all of that, I think, was that Tendi keeps trying to find ways to do things, like separate from the pregnancy story. She keeps trying to find ways to do things that she will feel comfortable with. And even sort of deceiving herself into thinking, like, the Queen will be happy that they compromised. And that's not how Orion society works.
Yeah, she doesn't really fit into Orion society. And in a way, the whole thing of how she was overly protective of her sister and that everyone knew she was pregnant, but her sister didn't want to tell her because she was trying to protect her. It was funny, she has the little Mugatu slippers and, all the stuff about that.
I know. I was like, where was she when I was pregnant? I would have liked Tendi jumping around, trying to put my feet up and give me slippers.
But it kind of showed how she's not made for piracy, even though every once in a while, she certainly can pull it off, and there was great action in this episode. Yeah, it's just,
it's not where her heart is.
Yeah.
Like, she's really good at it, but it's not where her heart is. And the beauty of it is that her sister wants her to be where her heart is and considers that to be the most important thing. Like, she doesn't want her daughter seeing Tendi not following her heart.
Yeah, that was very sweet how they turned it around of she was protecting her because, the rules is she'd have to stay behind and train the new mistress of the Winter Constellations.
Right.
I mean, even though there was a lot of action, it was still funny. That was a good, and they are leaning into kind of the stupid blue Orions who were, kind of doofuses or now they're Azure, right?
Yes.
Yes. But still,
House Azure.
No one's falling for it.
No, I also like that Tendi's mom was like, I don't care. That's fine. I'm fine with not having all the money anymore.
Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise, although that didn't last long. Although it does kind of bring up the thing of why do Orions care about like gold and gems? I mean, they must have replicators too, right?
You would think.
They've certainly pirated enough ships to get one at this point.
Right.
So is it just like a cultural tradition for them to not use them or whatever?
I think it has to be because otherwise I think there's a big issue with Starfleet giving all the wealth to one particular family.
Right. Exactly.
So it would have to be less meaningful in some way. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was like, someone's going to have something to say about that.
Yeah, that was a bit of a Prime Directive violation there to essentially get into Orion politics. And
yeah, that was full on interference.
Yeah, certainly putting the thumb on the scales. But hey, like Picard, messed around with Klingon politics all the time, right? So,
well, they asked him to, though.
Fair enough.
I did recently rewatch that, I think. So it's fresh in my mind. And I loved the stuff with T'Lyn and Rutherford. Rutherford's missing Tendi so much, and T'Lyn is trying to like distract him and be his friend, and then she's trying to help, and then she realizes the thing she really needs to do is to smash the shuttlecraft up again.
I've always had a bit of fanon of what's going on with the Sequoia because they've been working on it for 4 seasons, and I've always thought, like, are they ever going to finish it? And that's not the point. I started to realize like the point is they just like working on, like last season they added a grappler to it, or was that a couple seasons ago? It's just something for them to do, and now it's taken on an even bigger life with Tendi gone and Rutherford. And so, no, it was a great bonding moment. It's a great way to show that T'Lyn is part of the gang, as it were. It's a nice little sea story, which they don't often do on this show because you don't have a lot of time.
Yeah. No, and everything had the right amount of time. That's something they're very good at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we didn't get much from the bridge crew. We heard Ransom. There was a very silly moment with Billups slightly on fire because his mom sent him a dragon.
Yeah.
I don't even think we hear his voice, but I appreciate that little bit of Billups. I love Billups.
Yeah, I know you do. He's fun.
Oh, yeah, and Paul Scheer is very funny.
He's great. So. Yeah, he's really, really great. We should get him on this podcast because he's a huge Star Trek fan too.
Oh, that would be so much fun.
Yeah, he seems like a great guy.
But there was quite a lot of... I mean, this episode was very sitcom-y. Like the whole Tendi storyline was that whole trope of one person has a secret and the other, so if you don't tell the other it's like the whole thing would have been resolved if two people just talked to each other at the beginning of the episode.
It's very Shakespearean in that sense.
The other story, with Mariner and Boimler, there were, very sitcom-y lessons to be learned where both of them were kind of learning important life lessons about in this case, how both of them approach leadership, which is important because they were both promoted last season. And this season, I guess they're leaning more into what that really means as leaders of other ensigns. And I kind of like the two ensigns.
Yeah.
They had to, boss
Bring
around.
Back from the dead.
Right. Because they listened to Bointler. Was it Bointlers? Bointers. Number 17. The tie-dye little alien bug.
Yeah, the flora and fauna.
I really did like the gardening robot because it's such a trope of because it's the old HAL 9000 trope of if you give him conflicting orders and he goes, I have conflicting orders. There's no predicting what I might do, which is what happened to HAL, which is why he became homicidal in the end.
He also said, hands up or I'll prune you. Just goofy, silly stuff. I loved when Boimler said, it is possible to do everything right and still get your away team kidnapped by the corporate elite. A little throwback, yeah. But I didn't like this overall. I didn't like this one as much as the first one. It wasn't as strong. It was still fun, but it wasn't as strong.
Yeah, I guess I would agree with that. I mean, I thought they were both good, but yeah, I guess you just can't top the season opener, which are always hard to top to begin with. Yeah, it was funnier. I'd say the first one was funnier. We got some Easter eggs in this one. Pyrethean bat milk apparently comes full of vitamins, which is probably why Dr. Phlox kept them around.
Yes, he did. I liked Mariner's observation that I love when stuff isn't our fault. It's always nice.
There was what did you get? It was funny. The gag of how he kept on using her communicator.
Yeah.
It's just a little thing. There's just such a great attention to detail on this show, I think, in general.
Yeah. No, and even, look, they're smart the way they set things up, like the door gag. Like, Rutherford's playing with the door, and you kind of think maybe Tendy's going to show up, but then it's to Lynn, and then you finally get convinced nothing's going to happen, and then boom, Tendy's there.
Yeah. So, together, I guess this is the new normal. I think I've seen Paramount Plus and other networks do this where streaming networks are often doing multiple episodes to start with. I mean, obviously Netflix does whole seasons. They did 2020.
But Shrinking is on Apple and they just put 2 episodes up also.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's smart to not do the whole season at once, but give you a couple. Get you
Especially
going.
If it's been a long time.
Yeah. I mean, in this case, it's been a year. It's almost like a normal TV show.
It's fairly reasonable.
There were 13 months between season premieres, and there was a strike in there which affected the actors. So that's, compared to Strange New Worlds, that's pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
Hiatus-wise. They didn't do a previously on, but I don't think you really needed one.
You don't need it. We don't. I mean, Tendy's the continuing story there, and it's not like you need. It's all covered in those episodes. In the first 2 episodes, we know why she's there. We know she's still hanging out. We know she wants to get back.
Well, Brad's whole thing of he thought his actions in the season 4 finale were going to get him into the 30 on 30, and then he was crushed by that. So he kind of brought that up a little bit, tangentially. Yeah. And definitely, was there any mention of the subspace rifts in the second episode? I don't remember. I mean, it's obviously the season arc, but as Mike said, it was going to be, it's not heavily part of the season. There is a season arc. The rifts are obviously the season arc. But it's not like last season with the mystery ship and it pops up in every episode. It says hello and blows up another alien.
Right.
It's very thin in the background. It'll probably come up in a much bigger way, maybe in the second half of the season.
Yeah, they're going to use it for sure for stories.
But we are seeing, I think, a bit more serialization with the characters. I think definitely the pad that Boimler stole from his alternate self is going to...
Oh, yeah, that's got to come up somehow.
He grew the mustache, so, he's inspired by that beard, obviously.
Clearly.
So that's, this is kind of what Strange New Worlds wants to do, which is episodic sci-fi situation of the week, but heavily serialized when it comes to the characters. Not that they haven't done character serialization before, but I think they're just getting better at it.
Yep, I would agree. All right, I think that's mostly what I have to say about these 2 episodes.
Yeah, I don't think I got anything else to say, except, I'm glad it's back.
Yeah, I've missed it.
I'm not going to worry too much about it being the last season. I'm just going to enjoy it as is, and in December we'll start feeling it, I think.
We'll start weeping in a few, later.
Yes. Well, Mike said it. We're going to cry, so I wouldn't put it past us. All right. Welcome back, Lower Decks. Okay, so it's time to wrap things up with our bits of the week. I'm doing a little bit of a follow-up, which is there's this thing called Universal Fan Fest. We now we did an article on that where we have some more detail now. And I'm just really excited that there's going to be a thing I could drive to, and it's going to be in an amusement park next spring. And the cool thing is it's going to be the bridge from Picard. So the one thing they saved, they destroyed the Titan/Enterprise bridge for I don't know why, but whatever. They spent all the money on building it, and they're like, screw it, and they destroyed it, which certainly makes Legacy an expensive show to make because they'd have to start over. But someone had the forethought to say, let's keep the Enterprise D bridge, which they only used for like a week or less, and that is going to be on display at Universal Fan Fest. And I hope this happens more often, and it goes on tour, people should see this and experience it. So I'm going to see it on April 25th when this thing opens up, unless they let me in before then.
Nice.
So what's your bit of the week?
Mine is the great LeVar Burton was at the White House and was awarded the Medal of Excellence in Humanities by President Biden for the work he's done with literature and expression in the arts and literacy advocacy. So he's so proud and so happy. His wife did this great post. I just think it's fantastic. He really, no matter what he's doing career-wise, he's always working to improve literacy. And I think it's phenomenal.
It's quite the honor. Other honorees there were like Steven Spielberg and Spike Lee. There was a couple dozen in total. So, he really deserves this accolade. He does.
He does. I think, I'm so impressed by him and everything that he does. So, and he appreciates what a big deal it is and what an honor it is. So it's just a lovely thing. Go LeVar.
There's more to come from him, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Next week will probably be shorter because we'll only have one episode of Lower Decks to cover. And see you next Friday.
See ya.